Hi, everyone. I feel doubly blessed. Not only did the other Reverend Larry ask me back to speak, but she also gave me one of my favorite topics, optimism. So sit back, get ready for a whirlwind of good ideas and good outcomes. But where should we start? Well, maybe at the beginning, the real beginning. I'd like you to meet Ugg at the dawn of civilization. Now, I really should have a costume change and color in my eyebrows because Ugg lives at a cave some thousands of years ago, really when the human civilization is just getting started. And Ugg is kind of a taciturn guy. He's been appointed by his tribe to be a watcher during hunting. And so Ugg's job is to sit in the middle of a savanna with grass up to just about his eye level. And then he is constantly vigilant. Vigilant for two things, and they relate really to the idea of flight and fight. One, the fighting part of it is he's looking and listening for the potential prey that that his group, that his tribe might be able to take down. So he's listening for the snuffling of a warthog. He's listening for the rustling of an antelope, or just a couple pointy things that might be antelope antenna sticking up above the grass. But he's also looking for something else. He's looking for the tawny nature, the tawny part of the rustling in the grass that might indicate a tiger, because tigers are something that really the tribe can't deal with. It usually ends in death for everyone. And so that would be the flee mechanism. So here's poor Ugg, up to his eyes in the grass, just listening and straining to see what will go wrong next. Okay, well, let's fast forward a few 100,000 years, or is it a million years? I don't know. I'm not very good at ancient history. But what I do know is we don't live in Ugg's world anymore, right? When the phones rings and it's a relative we don't want to talk to, it's not like we're going to get eaten, right? When we see the neighbor that we don't like walking down the street, it shouldn't engage our flight and fight mechanism, right? Nothing bad is going to happen. And yet, the part of Ugg's brain still exists in our brain. We still have that flight or fight mechanism that may not even be valid at all anymore. I mean, certainly we do need to run when we see the train coming at us. We certainly need to avoid being hit by a car. But those are pretty rare things. Those are not everyday kind of situations that would bother us. No, no, these days it's the unwanted phone call, it's the knock of the door, and we recognize someone we'd rather not talk to. It's the person that speaks up against us in a meeting, or the family member that we've had just miserable encounters with. Those are the things that are still triggering that flight or fight mechanism that sometimes get us into trouble. And this is part of the way our brain is wired. It's actually brained, our brain is actually wired to not be optimistic, to be pessimistic. Our brain is wired for us to find the things that are going to be hazardous to us. We're constantly looking for the person we'd rather not talk to, or the potentially dangerous situation. And by dangerous, of course, I don't mean physical danger, I mean social danger, right? The conversation that might go bad. But our brain is constantly still scanning for those things, just as though Ugg were still alive in us. And in fact, I have a joke that I'd like to share with you, which I think illustrates what's going on and the way we think of pessimism and optimism today. So the joke takes place on the 50th floor of an office building, and an earthquake happens. And unfortunately, two of the people at an office meeting are tumbled out of a window. And so here they are falling to their death. Well, the pessimist is going, 49, 48, 47. Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. One more floor, and I'm going to die. And the optimist is going, well, that floor wasn't so bad. Well, that floor wasn't so bad. The 40th floor was okay. Nothing's bad happened yet. Okay. Now, I think that's the way a lot of us think about optimism, right? Foolishness in the face of reality. We're all going to die, so why would you be optimistic about it? But that's really not the truth of the world anymore. We think of the world as being an unsafe place, but I'd like to share some facts with you. And this was just compiled last year, even in the midst of some of the trouble that we see going on in the US with politics and so on. So, based on long term data, scholars largely argue that the world is getting better regarding health, regarding income, education, and though it can face worsening environmental crises, data indicates drastic reductions in poverty, higher life expectancy, and increased literacy over the last century, while simultaneously acknowledging rising environmental risks. Okay, so what are these improvements? Well, how about health and longevity? Life expectancy has risen from around 30 to over 70 years globally in the last century, and to over 80 years in most developed countries. There have also been significant reductions in infant and maternal mortality. There's also been poverty reduction. The proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty has dropped to record lows. Education and literacy. Global literacy rates have increased significantly, and the education gaps between genders is closing. Safety and human rights. Despite violent conflicts, long-term trends show a decrease in death rates from war, genocide, homicide. And technological advancement, access to technology, energy, and improved living standards has reduced the burden of household labor. So, what did you think of that? Is your life improving? Can we afford to be optimists? Well, I think so. And that leads to today's primary lesson. I want to thank you for waiting so patiently. Optimism is causative. Now, most of our lives, we thought that optimism is caused by good things. So, an example would be if something fabulous happens to you, we'll get more optimistic. But science tells a different story. When we're optimistic, we tend to look for and find better outcomes. When we're optimistic, we're open to new ways, more innovative ways to find our good. Optimism is actually causative. In the same way that UGG was scanning for all of the bad things that could happen out in the world, when we're optimistic, we're scanning for all the potential good things that could happen in the world. We're scanning for the advantages that we might take. We're scanning for the good news, for the coupons, for the life ahead that will be wonderful. And so optimism will tend to bring about those. When we're optimistic, we cause our situation to improve. Okay, so I don't know. Have I sold you on the idea of optimism being a good thing? I hope so. So let's move forward then. How can I become more optimistic? Assuming that I do think that that's a good idea, what can I do to become more positive? Well, first of all, I'm a great proponent to just saying no to things that aren't healthy for me. So if pessimism is unhealthy in the large part, how can I deal with that? I think we should try saying no. So when that thought comes up, well, I shouldn't try this new thing. It's most likely to fail. I would just say, Larry, no. Are you crazy? Trying new things is the way that we have new good in our lives. The same old thing is apt to produce the same old results. If I want newness, if I want additional goodness in my life, I need to try new things. I need to be optimistic about the outcomes. So I'm just going to say no to this. So when the thought of not being quite good enough to ask for that raise comes up, I say to myself, no, what do I have to lose? Of course, I'm going to ask for the raise. Of course, I'm going to try to find a better apartment. Of course, I'm going to do what's necessary to improve my relationship because I'm optimistic, and my optimism will actually seek out ways of making that reality of my good come true. So the optimism will help me find new ways of talking to my spouse and getting over some of the troubles that we experience. My optimism will find that right apartment for me that's nicer and closer to where I work and more convenient. My optimism is what will move me forward into obtaining the good that I desire. And so you might think about this in a couple different ways. One, and I think I may have talked about this in a talk a year or so ago to you. So bear with me if this sounds very familiar. Think about the phrase, what if it all goes right? So often we have scenarios about how life is going to go wrong. We picture our life headed down a tunnel into despair rather than a tunnel of happiness. Rather than breaking through into a greater life, we think of the ways that our health could fail. We think in ways that our job might become more difficult. But what if it all goes right? What if our expectations of good simply unfold in goodness? And so here's where I'd like you to employ the flip it, if you will. When I began thinking about things in a pessimistic way, I ask myself, what if it all goes right? And I try to flip it. What if this new apartment is not only going to be everything I want, but is actually more affordable than the one I have now? What if not only do I get a new raise, but the boss decides it's about time that I actually get my own office? Do you see what I mean? Perhaps it's time to not only say no to the negativity, but actually flip it. What if everything goes right? The other thing I'd like to suggest is to look for all the good around you and connect it to your thoughts and actions. So, right now, I'm sure you've noticed, right? I'm outside. It's a beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest. You might hear an airplane flying by or some birds. I don't know what'll get through my headset here, but it's a lovely day outside. And I got to tell you, being in good surroundings, looking for the good, seeing the beautiful birds and the flowers blooming, I get more positive. And so make it a practice to spend some time every day looking for the good around you and connecting it to your thoughts and actions. On purpose, I thought, let me see if I can record something outside today, despite, things that could go wrong. A squirrel might run across me, right? I don't know. But I had that optimism of it's beautiful outside. Let's try something new. Let's connect it to my own volition. I want to see greater good today. I want to be in the midst of greater good today. And so I connect the good that I see around me, whether it's the blooming rhododendrons or the pine tree. I connect it with my choices of coming outside. I connect it with having this wonderful environment that I get to call my own. I look at all the little things, right? I don't focus on what's going on in Washington. I don't focus on a war with Iran today. I'm focusing on the things right around me that are so good. I was making bread earlier today. I can still smell that good, the good that was created with my own two hands. This is one of the ways we can flip pessimism into optimism. So I think I've given you enough clues of why optimism is a good thing. So let's quickly do a recap here. We've covered a couple of science of mind spiritual principles today. And one, I didn't call it out by its name, but its principle is bound by precedence. This means that if we've had poor outcomes before, that does not predict that we will continue to have poor outcomes, right? We can look on the more optimistic, on the positive side. Just because I failed out of a my home ec class does not mean that I will not be a good cook, right? Do you know what I mean? We do not have to assume that the precedence, what has come before, is the guiding principle in my life. The guiding my principle in my life is love, is life, is joy, is peace, and I shall achieve those things. The second spiritual principle that we covered today is that optimism is causative. Ernest Holmes, the founder of the science of mind, put it this way: our thoughts become things. If we have positive thoughts, we will have positive outcomes. If we're optimistic, we will create optimism and optimistic outcomes for us and the people around us. Finally, we also found some ways to shift our thinking into the positive. One is the just say no, right? When negative thoughts come into your mind, when your fear of negative outcomes seems overwhelming, just say no. I do not have to think that. I do not need to think that outcomes I've experienced before are going to affect this outcome. You can even use the phrase, what if it all comes out right? And try the flip it method of taking the situation that's going on right now and saying, wait a minute, wait a minute. What if my daughter isn't in a car accident? What if she's just staying overnight at a friend's and she forgot to call me? Do you know what I mean? Let's go to the positive first. Let's flip it if we can. And then the last thing we talked about was simply looking for the good all around you. I guarantee wherever you are and whatever's going on, there are any number of good things happening. It might be flowers blooming in your yard. It might be a friend coming over for a cup of coffee. It might be coming together on Sunday to listen to a fabulous message. Well, I hope it's fabulous anyway. But what I do know there is good for you, and you can choose to have it through your positive thinking. Well, you know me, I'm destined to give you a little bit of homework. So your homework this week is to try the flip it exercise at least once a day this week. When you find yourself imagining negative outcomes, just ask yourself, what if it all comes out right? What if I can afford all of my bills this month and there might even be some left over? What if I can see a more positive outcome for my health? And so try flipping it, try mentally flipping it into a source of optimism. All right, well, today I'd like to close, of course, with a prayer. And so I invite you, if you would, just to go inwards for a moment and let us pray. There is one power, one presence, one thing, just this one collective consciousness that I call spirit, this spirit that is everything. And what I know about God is God doesn't know anything about failure. Failure and pessimism is not a quality of God. This I know for sure. God is love. God is life. God is it are the dreams that we have of a wonderful future. God is peace. God is abundance, right? And so for this day, I have abundance. I have love. I have joy. I have peace. I have that optimism that leads us into that life of love and peace and plenty. And as it is true for me, I know it can be true for everyone. I know that the people listening to my voice right now can claim that optimism, can claim a future that is bright, a future filled with God's love, a future that is full of integrity and joy, of peace and abundance. It's simply the promise that we are given as part of Spirit itself. And for this, I give great thanks. For this, I recognize that each one of us is centered in Spirit as a divine essence in the mind of God. And to us is due all of those good outcomes. To us is due everything that an optimist might dream of. And for this I give great thanks. Thankful to be here with you today. Grateful for God's blessings. I let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you so much for being with me today. Goodbye.